For thousands of years, one idea has survived every piece of evidence thrown at it, like a cockroach after the apocalypse. The belief that the Earth is flat. It sounds ridiculous today, but rewind history and you'll find an entire world built on this lie. A lie that shaped religion, exploration, even politics. Here's the wild part. The ancient Greeks already proved the Earth was round in the 3rd century BCE. They measured shadows, watched ships sink below the horizon, and even noticed new stars appearing as you traveled south. They had the receipts. But that didn't stop the flat idea from clinging to society like superglue. During the Middle Ages, the myth survived because it was simple, easy, comforting. A flat world meant you were at the center of everything, the cosmic VIP section. A round Earth? That meant you were floating on a spinning rock in infinite space. Uncomfortable, terrifying. So people stuck with the lie. Fast forward to the age of exploration. Sailors literally circled the planet, and still some people swore the world was a cosmic dinner plate. Even today, with satellites, GPS, and photos from space, the conspiracy refuses to die. Because this lie was never about the shape of the Earth. It was about the shape of human fear. Flat Earth survives because it makes complicated things simple, scary things safe, and the unknown known. It's not a belief about the planet, it's a belief about control. And that's why this ancient lie is still alive today, louder than ever.
If you picture a Viking, you probably imagine a giant warrior with a huge beard, an axe the size of a small tree, and of course a big shiny helmet with horns sticking out like a devil on steroids. But here's the twist. Vikings never wore horned helmets. Not in battle, not in raids, not ever. This entire image, the one everyone knows, was born from a lie so stylish, so theatrical, so dramatic, it stuck for centuries. The real Vikings, they wore practical, boring metal helmets or no helmets at all. No spikes, no horns, no cosplay energy. A horned helmet in combat would have been a death sentence, something for your enemy to grab onto before they introduce you to Valhalla. So where did the lie come from? In the 1800s, Europe became obsessed with Vikings. Not the real, muddy, unwashed version, but a glamorous, opera-ready version. And then came the man who ruined Viking accuracy forever. Costume designer Carl Emil Doppler. When he dressed the warriors for Wagner's opera Der Ring des Nibelungen, he added big, beautiful, curved horns to make them look more mythic, more savage, more barbarian. The audience loved it. Artists copied it. Painters exaggerated it. And boom, history got permanently cosplayed. By the time archaeologists found real Viking helmets, it was too late. The horned version had already invaded books, movies, Halloween costumes, metal band logos, everywhere. The truth is this: the horned Viking isn't a warrior. He's a 19th century fashion choice that became a global hallucination. And somehow, we all believed it.
Picture France in the 1700s. Streets filled with starving families, bread prices exploding, and anger rising like a kettle left on the fire too long. In the middle of the chaos stands one woman history loves to hate, Marie Antoinette. And the line everyone swears she said, "Let them eat cake." It's the perfect villain quote. Cold, heartless, evil queen energy. But here's the truth. She never said it, not even close. So how did the most infamous sentence in royal history get pinned on her? Long before Marie Antoinette was even born, French writers were already using that quote to mock the arrogance of the upper class. The earliest version appears in a book written 100 years before her, describing a spoiled princess who suggested peasants eat fancy pastries when they ran out of bread. But when the French Revolution started boiling and the people needed a monster to blame, Marie Antoinette was the perfect target. She was foreign, rich, beautiful, and married to a king who had no idea how to run a country. Revolutionary propagandists grabbed the old quote, slapped her name on it like a label, and launched it into the world. The lie spread like wildfire. Pamphlets, cartoons, rumors. Everyone repeated the line because it made the anger feel justified. And the real Marie? She spent much of her time donating to charities, visiting orphanages, and even trying to understand the people's struggles. But none of that mattered. The mob wanted a monster, and let them eat cake was the weapon. This is the dark truth. Marie Antoinette didn't create the quote. The revolution did. It wasn't her words that doomed her. It was a story everyone wanted to believe.
When you hear the name Napoleon Bonaparte, one image pops up instantly. A tiny, angry man stomping around Europe, compensating for his height by conquering half the continent. But here's the plot twist. Napoleon wasn't short at all. This entire legend, the Napoleon complex, the jokes, the memes, it's all one gigantic historical misunderstanding mixed with a bit of propaganda. So where did the lie start? When Napoleon died, French doctors measured him at 5'2", but that was French inches, which are longer than English ones. Converted to modern height, he was around 5'6" to 5'7", almost perfectly average for his time. Not tiny, not miniature, just normal. But the British, oh the British, were not going to let that ruin their fun. During the Napoleonic Wars, British cartoonists launched one of the most savage propaganda campaigns in history. In their drawings, Napoleon was turned into a furious, pocket-sized gremlin raging across maps, yelling orders from below table height. They needed their national enemy to look ridiculous, not intimidating. Tiny Napoleon was perfect. The more they exaggerated him, the more Europe laughed. Political cartoons spread. Newspapers repeated the idea, and eventually the whole world believed the lie. Short man with a big ego takes over Europe. In reality, Napoleon surrounded himself with very tall soldiers, his elite imperial guard. So compared to them, yeah, he looked shorter. But that's like standing next to NBA players and being called small. The truth is simple. Napoleon wasn't a short man. He was the victim of the most successful roast campaign in history. And honestly, the British won that battle without firing a single cannon.
We love to imagine medieval people as clueless villagers stumbling around in the dark, thinking the Earth was a giant pancake floating in space. Teachers said it, cartoons repeated it, movies turned it into a whole aesthetic. But here's the twist. Medieval people did not think the Earth was flat. They knew it was round. Almost everyone did. So how did this massive lie get baked into our culture? Let's go back. By the time the Middle Ages rolled around, scholars had already known the Earth was round for 1,500 years. Ancient Greeks proved it using math, sailors proved it using horizons, astronomers proved it using stars. The knowledge never disappeared. Medieval monks copied ancient science into their manuscripts. Sailors navigated using the curvature of the Earth. Educated Europeans literally taught a spherical Earth in universities. So where did the myth come from? In the 1800s, a few loud, dramatic writers decided to rewrite history to make medieval people look stupid and themselves look modern and enlightened. Writers like Washington Irving, the same guy who wrote The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, published a fictional story claiming that Christopher Columbus fought against flat Earth believers. Total fiction. But it went viral. Textbooks copied it, teachers repeated it. Suddenly, the whole medieval world was painted as a gang of confused flat earthers. It was a smear campaign, and we swallowed it whole. The real truth: people in the Middle Ages believed in demons, miracles, and cosmic signs, sure. But the shape of the Earth, that wasn't up for debate. The flat medieval world is a modern invention, one of the biggest historical lies ever taught.
Albert Einstein, the wild-haired genius, the man whose brain basically became a global symbol for intelligence. And yet, somewhere along the line, someone decided to spread the weirdest rumor ever. Einstein failed math in school. It sounds dramatic, it sounds relatable, but it's 100% false. Einstein didn't fail math, he destroyed math. By age 12, he was teaching himself algebra and geometry like it was a hobby. By 15, he was studying calculus for fun. This man wasn't struggling, he was speed-running the entire curriculum. So where did the lie come from? In the 1930s, a newspaper printed a fun fact claiming Einstein once failed a math exam. Einstein himself saw it and laughed. He literally wrote, "I never failed in mathematics. Before I was 15, I had mastered differential and integral calculus." Mic drop. But the lie kept spreading because it felt comforting. People loved the idea that even Einstein had a rough start. It made genius seem reachable, human, relatable. There's also a little twist. Einstein did fail something in school, but it wasn't math. It was a French language test and some subjects he didn't care about. And he openly hated the strict military-style teaching system in Germany. But math? Numbers? Physics? This dude was a monster, a prodigy, a walking equation. The truth is simple. Einstein didn't fail math. Math failed to keep up with Einstein.
For centuries, school books told the same heroic story. Christopher Columbus, the brave explorer who discovered America. But here's the truth that blows the entire narrative apart. Columbus didn't discover anything. Millions of people were already living there. And he didn't even step foot in North America. Let's rewind the tape. When Columbus set sail in 1492, he wasn't looking for a new world. He was chasing spices, silk, and a shortcut to Asia. He landed in the Caribbean, modern-day Bahamas, looked around, and confidently announced he had found India. He was so wrong that he called the people Indians because he genuinely believed he was standing somewhere near China. But here's the wild twist. He never touched the mainland US, not once. The guy who discovered America didn't even go there. Meanwhile, indigenous civilizations had been thriving for over 20,000 years. Vikings reached North America 500 years before Columbus. Polynesian navigators crossed the Pacific with no maps, and countless cultures already called the land home. Columbus didn't discover a new world. He walked into someone else's. And the story gets darker. His arrival unleashed a wave of violence, slavery, and disease that wiped out entire populations. The heroic explorer image, that was crafted later by European historians who wanted a clean, shiny founder myth. Columbus didn't discover America. He discovered people who already lived there and then claimed their land as his own. The real story isn't a celebration. It's a correction.
Everyone knows the story. The Greeks build a giant wooden horse, hide soldiers inside. The Trojans drag it into their city, and boom, Troy falls overnight. It's one of the most iconic moments in ancient history.
But here's the twist that flips the legend on its head. The Trojan horse might not have been a horse at all. It might not have even been an object. Let's dive in. The story comes from Homer's Odyssey and later from Virgil's Aeneid, epic poetry written centuries after the war supposedly happened. And poets love symbolism. A horse in ancient Greek culture wasn't just an animal. It was a sign for Poseidon, god of earthquakes, storms, and destruction. So some historians think the Trojan horse was a metaphor for something far more terrifying, like an earthquake that cracked Troy's walls open, allowing invaders to swarm inside. Others argue it could have been a siege engine, a giant battering ram shaped like a horse, because the Greeks loved decorating things with animals. And there's an even juicier theory. The horse was actually a ship. In some ancient languages, the words for ship and wooden horse overlap. Greeks often carved horse heads on their warships, so the gift might have been a captured vessel that smuggled soldiers into Troy's harbor. Another possibility? It was a wooden structure, but not for decoration. It may have been a hollow ritual statue meant as an offering to the gods, which the Trojans dragged inside the city, accidentally carrying Greek soldiers with it. The truth is, we don't know what the Trojan horse was. A statue, a ship, a war machine, a metaphor for a natural disaster? What we do know is this. A giant wooden toy horse in the middle of a 10-year war makes zero military sense. But as symbolism, as epic storytelling, it's perfect. The Trojan horse we imagine today might be the result of 3,000 years of exaggeration, poetry, and artistic fan fiction. The real horse, whatever it was, has been lost to time. Only the legend survives.
Ask any parent what happens when a kid eats sugar, and they'll swear it transforms them into a tiny tornado with rockets strapped to their shoes. Birthday cake equals chaos. Candy equals instant turbo mode. Chocolate, prepare for impact. But here's the twist that almost no one believes. Sugar does not make kids hyper. Not biologically, not chemically, not even a little bit. This lie survives because it feels true, but science absolutely wrecks it. Let's break it down. Researchers have run dozens of controlled experiments on kids. Real tests, real sugar, real monitoring. Some children got sugar. Some got placebos. Parents didn't know who had what. And the results? No difference. Kids who ate sugar behaved exactly the same as kids who ate zero sugar. Then, researchers tried a different version of the experiment. They gave parents a group of perfectly normal kids and told them these children just ate a ton of sugar. Suddenly, parents reported hyperactivity, wild energy, bad behavior, even though the kids had eaten nothing sweet at all. That's the key. It's not the sugar. It's the expectation. If a child is at a birthday party, balloons, excitement, friends, chaos, of course they're hyped up. But we blame the cake because it's easier than admitting kids are naturally high-energy little gremlins when they're having fun. Here's the real biology. Sugar does not cause hyperactivity. It gives a quick energy boost to the body but doesn't affect behavior, focus, or adrenaline. The infamous sugar rush? Pure myth. The hyper kids at parties? They're excited about the party, not the frosting. Sugar gets blamed for what childhood actually looks like. Noise, laughter, running, chaos, and tiny humans who treat life like a permanent festival. The truth is simple. Kids aren't hyper because of sugar. They're hyper because they're kids.
You've heard this one a million times. Humans only use 10% of their brains. It's the perfect setup for sci-fi movies, self-help gurus, and those ads promising to unlock your hidden potential. But here's the reality check.
This is one of the biggest scientific lies ever told. Humans use all of their brain, just not all at once. Let's dig into the myth. The idea exploded in the early 1900s when psychologists were trying to explain why people had so much untapped potential. Someone misquoted, misinterpreted, and missold that idea, and suddenly the world believed we were walking around with giant, unused mental supercomputers in our skulls. But neuroscience absolutely obliterates this myth. Modern brain scans, MRIs, PET scans, the whole sci-fi looking toolbox show something shocking. Even when you're resting, nearly every part of your brain is lit up and working. There is no sleeping 90%, no dark frozen zones, no hidden reserves waiting for a magical switch. Different areas handle different jobs: memory, emotions, movement, vision, hearing, imagination, planning, breathing, keeping your heart beating, processing the world around you. Even when you're daydreaming, your brain is buzzing like a power grid at full load. If we truly used only 10% of it, a simple fall would erase entire functions. A tiny stroke would wipe out everything you can do. Our brains are way too efficient, way too expensive, and we burn too many calories to keep 90% of it idle. So why does the lie survive? Because people love the fantasy. The idea that you have a hidden genius locked inside, waiting to be activated, feels like a superpower story. But the truth is even cooler. Your entire brain is working all the time, and every piece matters. We don't lack brain power. We lack discipline, focus, sleep, curiosity, and sometimes motivation. The limit isn't your brain's capacity. It's how you use the incredible machine you already have.
You've probably seen it in cartoons and nature documentaries. A chameleon calmly crawling across a branch, then bam! It magically changes color to disappear into its surroundings. It sounds like the ultimate stealth animal. But here's the twist. That's not really why chameleons change color. In reality, chameleons primarily change color to communicate and regulate their body temperature, not to hide from predators. Bright, flashy colors often mean I'm ready to fight or stay away, while duller, muted tones might signal submission or calm. They can also shift colors to absorb or reflect heat, keeping their body temperature just right. So next time you see a chameleon turning green on a leaf or brown on a branch, don't assume it's hiding. It's showing off its mood, expressing dominance, or simply keeping cozy. The myth of the master of camouflage is way more colorful and complex than you think.
It's one of the most famous facts people love to repeat. The Great Wall of China is the only man-made structure visible from space. It sounds incredible, but it's not true. Astronauts have confirmed that from low Earth orbit, the Great Wall is extremely difficult to see with the naked eye. It's narrow, built from materials that blend in with the surrounding landscape, and often obscured by haze or weather. In fact, many roads, airports, and cities are far easier to spot than the wall. The myth likely began centuries ago, long before humans ever went to space, as a poetic exaggeration of its size. So while the Great Wall is an awe-inspiring achievement on Earth, it's not a glowing stripe across the planet. The truth is humbling. It's massive, yes, but it still hides beautifully in the folds of the land it was built to protect.
Picture a bull charging in a matador and a red cape. Classic, right? You might have grown up thinking bulls go crazy at the sight of red. But here's the shocking truth. Bulls are actually colorblind to red. Bulls, like most cattle, can't distinguish red from green. That furious charge isn't triggered by the color at all. It's the movement that provokes them. Swing the cape slowly or keep it still, and the bull might not even react. The red color? It's purely for the audience, the drama, and tradition. So, the next time you think bulls hate red, remember, it's not the color that enrages them. It's the wave of the cloth, the hustle of the matador, and a centuries-old myth that's stuck in our minds. The red is just a showy prop in a story we've been telling ourselves for hundreds of years.
Think of the last time you cracked open a fortune cookie after a Chinese meal. You probably assumed it's a classic Chinese tradition, right? Wrong. Totally wrong. Fortune cookies are actually an American invention. They were popularized in California in the early 20th century by Japanese immigrants. Yes, Japanese, not Chinese. The sweet, crunchy cookie with a little paper fortune inside wasn't something you'd find in China at all, until Americans brought it back there decades later. So that lucky wisdom tucked inside, it's more American than Chinese. Every time you read one, you're actually tasting a slice of cross-cultural myth-making, a quirky invention that millions have mistaken for centuries-old tradition. The cookie may taste sweet, but history is a little sour, at least for your assumptions.
You've probably heard it 100 times. Goldfish have a memory span of just 3 seconds. That means every time they swim around, it's like they're seeing the world for the first time, forever trapped in a tiny, forgetful loop. But here's the truth. It's a complete myth. Scientific studies have shown that goldfish can actually remember things for months. They can learn tricks, recognize their owners, and even navigate mazes. Those little fins aren't just flailing randomly, they're capable of complex learning and memory. That 3-second memory idea? It started as a simplification and somehow stuck in popular culture. So next time you see a goldfish swimming calmly in its bowl, remember, it's probably planning, remembering, and noticing more than you give it credit for. The goldfish isn't forgetful, it's just far smarter than its reputation.
When you think of the light bulb, Thomas Edison probably comes to mind. The iconic image of him holding a glowing bulb has been drilled into history books for over a century. But here's the twist. Edison didn't invent the light bulb. The concept of electric light existed long before Edison. People like Humphrey Davy, Warren de la Rue, and Joseph Swan had already created functioning bulbs. Edison's real achievement wasn't inventing the idea, but improving it. He made a bulb that was practical, long-lasting, and affordable for everyday use. And he figured out the entire system to deliver electricity safely to homes. So while Edison didn't invent the light bulb from scratch, he deserves credit for making electric light part of modern life. The myth simplifies a story of decades of experimentation into one face. But history is far more electrifying than that.
When you picture the Salem witch trials, you probably imagine terrified women tied to stakes, flames rising, and a grim Puritan crowd watching. It's a haunting image, but it's almost entirely false. In reality, none of the accused witches in Salem, Massachusetts were burned, most were hanged, and one man was pressed to death with heavy stones. Burning at the stake was more common in Europe, not colonial America. The idea of fiery deaths in Salem comes from movies, books, and over-dramatized retellings that made the trials seem even darker than they were. So, the flames of Salem are largely a myth. The real horror was the hysteria, false accusations, and the destruction of innocent lives, not the blazing pyres. History was cruel enough without adding Hollywood fire effects.
You've probably heard it dozens of times. On average, humans swallow 8 spiders every year while they sleep. It's creepy, it's gross, and it's completely false. This myth has no basis in reality. Spiders generally avoid humans. They don't crawl into mouths or ears while we sleep. The origin of this claim is likely a fabricated fact that spread like wildfire online and in schools. Scientists have called it one of the most persistent urban legends ever. So rest easy. Your mouth is spider-free while you sleep. The only thing you're swallowing unknowingly is maybe some drool, and that's way less terrifying. Sometimes the scariest stories are just stories.
You've probably seen it in nature documentaries or cartoons. Tiny lemmings marching in droves, then leaping off cliffs in a dramatic mass suicide. It's shocking, horrifying, and completely false. Lemmings don't intentionally kill themselves. The myth was popularized by a staged Disney documentary in the 1950s, where filmmakers actually pushed lemmings off cliffs to make a story. In reality, lemmings do migrate in large groups when populations boom, and some may accidentally fall off cliffs or drown while crossing rivers, but there's no suicidal intent. So the idea of lemmings as tiny, self-destructive creatures is pure myth. Their mass death is just nature, migration, and bad storytelling combined. The truth is a lot less dramatic, but far more interesting. Some people still insist that the Apollo 11 moon landing in 1969 never happened. They say it was filmed on a Hollywood set, with astronauts acting out the giant leap for mankind. But the truth? This is one of the most persistent conspiracy theories in history. The moon landing was very real. Hundreds of thousands of people worked on the Apollo program, and the evidence is overwhelming. Moon rocks, telemetry data, photographs, videos, and even retroreflectors left on the lunar surface that scientists still use to measure the distance to the moon today. The faked landing story thrives because of suspicious shadows in photos, flag movement, and mistrust of government, but every claim falls apart under scientific scrutiny. So yes, humans walked on the moon. The conspiracy is more a story of paranoia than of truth, and the real achievement is far more incredible than any Hollywood set could ever hope to match.
When you picture Vikings, you probably imagine wild, scruffy warriors with horned helmets, covered in dirt and blood, pillaging villages without a care. But here's the truth. Vikings were far cleaner and more sophisticated than popular culture suggests. Archaeological evidence shows that Vikings bathed frequently, sometimes weekly, which was far more often than many Europeans of the same era. They used combs, tweezers, and even soap made from animal fat and ash. Vikings cared about personal hygiene, appearance, and grooming. They weren't the uncivilized brutes Hollywood often portrays. They were skilled sailors, traders, and craftsmen with advanced knowledge of navigation, agriculture, and law. So next time someone calls Vikings filthy barbarians, remember, reality is much more nuanced and far more fascinating. They were warriors, yes, but also surprisingly civilized by medieval standards.
You've probably seen movies or read stories claiming that ancient Romans would eat until they were full, then rush to vomit just to keep feasting. Sounds decadent, right? But this is mostly a myth. Romans did enjoy lavish banquets, but the idea of communal vomiting to make room for more food comes from a misunderstanding of historical texts. Some wealthy Romans used feathered tools called vomitoria, but these weren't for vomiting. They were actually the architectural passages in amphitheaters and arenas that allowed crowds to spew out quickly. The misconception twisted the term into a story about gluttony. So while Romans loved luxury, wine, and opulent meals, the image of them vomiting between courses is mostly Hollywood exaggeration. The truth is, they were indulgent, yes, but not grotesquely so.
You've probably been told as a kid that eating spinach will make you strong like Popeye. The secret? It's supposedly insane iron content. But here's the twist. Spinach isn't nearly as iron-rich as we've been led to believe. The myth started because of a decimal point error in a 19th century study. Someone misplaced a dot when recording spinach's iron content, and suddenly it looked 10 times higher than it really was. People believed it. Kids ate cans of spinach thinking they'd grow muscles overnight, and the legend stuck. Spinach is still healthy, full of vitamins, and a decent source of iron, but it won't turn you into a superhuman overnight. Sometimes history's facts are just a tiny typo that grows into a giant myth.
The image is classic. Fleas on rats carrying the deadly Black Death scuttling through medieval streets, infecting everyone in their path. It's terrifying, and it's only partially true. Recent research shows that while rats did play a role, humans themselves and human fleas and lice were likely the main drivers of the plague spread. The disease could jump directly from person to person, and crowded, unsanitary conditions in towns made it spread like wildfire. Rats were more of a supporting actor than the star villain. So the Black Death wasn't just a story of rats running wild, it was a combination of human behavior, poor hygiene, and a killer bacterium. History loves a simple villain, but the truth is always messier and scarier.
When you think of Medusa, you probably imagine a terrifying woman with snakes for hair, turning anyone who looks at her to stone. But here's the twist. In the oldest myths, Medusa wasn't always a monster. Originally, Medusa was a beautiful mortal woman. Some versions of the myth describe her as a priestess of Athena, admired for her beauty. Her monstrous transformation, snakes for hair, petrifying gaze, came later as a punishment by Athena after Medusa was violated by Poseidon. Over time, storytellers simplified her into the iconic monster we know today, erasing the nuance of her story and turning her into a symbol of fear rather than tragedy. So Medusa wasn't born monstrous, she was made that way by circumstances and mythology's rewriting. Her story is less about evil and more about power, injustice, and the transformation of narratives through time.
The Library of Alexandria, an ancient treasure trove of knowledge, housing thousands of scrolls and manuscripts, is often said to have been wiped out in one catastrophic fire. It's a dramatic image, flames consuming all human wisdom in a single night, but the truth is far more complicated. The library didn't vanish in one event. Historical evidence suggests it declined over centuries due to neglect, multiple incidents of destruction, and the general turmoil of war. Pieces of it may have been lost to fires, but there was no single night of total obliteration. The romantic idea of one tragic blaze wiping out all knowledge is mostly a myth, fueled by centuries of storytelling and nostalgia. So while the Library of Alexandria did disappear, it wasn't a single fiery apocalypse. It was a slow erosion of human heritage over time, which somehow makes its story even more poignant.
When you picture the Egyptian pyramids, you probably imagine armies of chained slaves hauling massive stones under the blazing sun. It's dramatic, but it's mostly a myth. Archaeological evidence shows that the pyramids were built by skilled laborers who were well-fed, housed, and respected for their work. These were not slaves in chains, but a rotating workforce of craftsmen, engineers, and seasonal laborers. They took pride in their work, and many archaeologists believe they were even honored in death with burial near the pyramids. The idea of slave-built pyramids comes from ancient Greek historians who misunderstood Egyptian society, and centuries of Hollywood storytelling that loved a dramatic narrative. The reality? Pyramids were built by dedicated workers, not captives. and that makes their achievement even more astonishing.
Cleopatra is often remembered as the quintessential Egyptian queen, the last ruler of ancient Egypt, draped in gold and mystery. But here's the twist. Cleopatra wasn't ethnically Egyptian. She was actually a member of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek family that ruled Egypt after Alexander the Great's empire fractured. Cleopatra was born in Alexandria and ruled Egypt, but her ancestry was mostly Greek with some Macedonian roots and possibly a little Egyptian. She embraced Egyptian culture, learned the language, and presented herself as a pharaoh. But calling her Egyptian by blood is misleading. So Cleopatra's genius wasn't just political, it was cultural. She blended Greek heritage with Egyptian identity, ruling cleverly while navigating both worlds. The myth of her being purely Egyptian simplifies a fascinating, multicultural story of power, diplomacy, and image-making.
You've probably seen portraits of George Washington and heard the story. The first U.S. president had a full set of wooden teeth. It sounds uncomfortable, but here's the truth. It's mostly a myth. Washington did suffer from severe dental problems and wore dentures, but none of them were made of wood. His teeth were actually crafted from a combination of human teeth, animal teeth, ivory, and metal. The wooden teeth idea likely comes from the way ivory and other materials stained over time, giving them a grainy, wood-like appearance. So Washington's dental struggles were real, but the wooden teeth story is an exaggeration that stuck in popular imagination. The reality? He bravely led a fledgling nation while dealing with painful, complex dentures. Not exactly the charming simplicity history books often suggest.
Stonehenge is one of the world's most mysterious monuments, and it's often linked to druids, ancient priests performing rituals amidst the massive stones. But here's the twist. The druids had nothing to do with building it. Stonehenge was constructed thousands of years before the druids even existed. Archaeological evidence shows that its earliest phases date back to around 3100 BCE, while the druids didn't appear until the Iron Age, more than 1,000 years later. The druids may have visited the site for ceremonies, but they weren't the masterminds behind its construction. So the idea of mystical druids raising those enormous stones is pure myth. The real builders remain largely unknown, which makes Stonehenge even more fascinating. It's a monument of ancient ingenuity, not druidic ritual theater.
When you hear about the Great Fire of London in 1666, you might imagine brave citizens and soldiers tearing down houses to create firebreaks, finally halting the flames. It's a neat, heroic story, but it's not entirely true. While firebreaks were attempted, the real reason the fire stopped spreading was largely the weather. A strong change in wind direction finally slowed the inferno, allowing the remaining fires to be controlled. Firefighters and citizens worked hard, but the decisive factor wasn't human effort. It was nature stepping in. So the image of Londoners heroically stopping the fire with wooden gaps between houses is more legend than fact. Sometimes history's drama comes from forces beyond human control, and that makes survival stories even more extraordinary.
We've all memorized it. Mount Everest, 8,848 meters, the tallest mountain on Earth. But here's the twist. It depends on how you measure tallest. Everest is the highest point above sea level, but if you measure from base to summit, Mauna Kea in Hawaii is actually taller. Mauna Kea rises over 10,000 meters from its underwater base, dwarfing Everest in total height, even though its peak is lower above sea level.
And if you consider distance from the Earth's center, due to the equatorial bulge, Mount Chimborazo in Ecuador technically takes the crown. So, Everest is not the undisputed tallest mountain. It's just the most famous. The Earth loves to complicate our neat little labels, and the tallest mountain depends entirely on how you look at it. If you think sushi simply means raw fish, you're not alone. That's the assumption most people make, but it's not true. In Japanese, the word sushi actually refers to vinegared rice, not the fish. Raw fish is called sashimi. So sushi can include raw fish, cooked fish, vegetables, or even eggs. Anything served with that special vinegared rice. The myth likely started because raw fish is often served on sushi in Western countries, and the nuance of rice versus fish got lost in translation. So next time you order sushi, remember, it's all about the rice. The fish is optional, and the real art is in the seasoning, preparation, and presentation, not just whether it's raw.
You've probably seen countless horror movies, action scenes, and epic battles with blood gushing everywhere, and maybe assumed it's just movie magic. But here's a fun twist. The first fake blood used in films was actually inspired by ketchup. Early filmmakers experimented with whatever looked convincing on camera. Ketchup, syrup, and other red liquids were cheap, safe, and visually effective, giving the illusion of fresh blood without any danger. Over time, special effects teams developed more realistic formulas, but the iconic bright red movie blood owes a lot to condiments and household ingredients. So the next time a villain is stabbed on screen, remember, that shocking red liquid might trace its origins to your pantry. Hollywood's gore has a surprisingly tasty beginning.
You've probably heard it countless times. Sharks have to keep swimming constantly or they'll die. It's a dramatic image. Sharks gliding through the ocean in a never-ending race for survival. But here's the truth. It's not universally true. Some shark species, like the great white, do need to swim to keep water flowing over their gills for oxygen. But many others, including some reef sharks and nurse sharks, can rest on the seafloor and pump water over their gills while stationary. The myth overgeneralizes one species to all sharks, creating a tense cinematic image that's not entirely accurate. So, sharks aren't all doomed to endless motion. They're far more versatile, adaptable, and fascinating than the movies suggest. The ocean's apex predators have tricks up their fins that we're only beginning to understand.
It's a classic line from biology class. Humans evolved from chimpanzees. Simple, neat, and wrong. Humans didn't descend from chimps. They share a common ancestor with them, a species that lived millions of years ago. Chimpanzees and humans are like evolutionary cousins. That common ancestor gave rise to two separate lineages, one leading to modern chimps, the other to us. Saying humans evolved from chimpanzees erases millions of years of evolution, adaptation, and branching species. It's like claiming your cousin's kid is your parent, technically related, but completely inaccurate. So humans didn't evolve from chimps. They evolved alongside them, sharing a long, twisted family tree that shows just how intricate and surprising evolution really is.
Hollywood has made it a cliché. A loved one disappears, and the police say, wait 24 hours before filing a report. But here's the truth. It's a dangerous myth. There is no law anywhere that requires you to wait. In fact, the first hours are the most critical in locating a missing person. Police encourage immediate reporting because delays can allow crucial evidence to disappear, witnesses to forget, or suspects to flee. The 24-hour rule likely started in movies and TV, but it has no basis in reality. So if someone vanishes, every second counts. The idea of waiting a full day is not just wrong, it could be life-threatening.
Reality doesn't follow Hollywood's slow pace, and time is always the most precious factor in a real-life missing person case.
The story is iconic. The unsinkable Titanic struck a single iceberg and tragedy struck. Simple, dramatic, and widely believed. But it's not the whole truth. While the iceberg did puncture the hull, the disaster was much more complex. The ship's design, including watertight compartments that weren't fully sealed at the top, made it vulnerable. The steel used in construction was brittle in freezing temperatures, and the lookout had no binoculars. Combined with high speed and inadequate lifeboats, the iceberg was only the spark. The tragedy was engineered by a series of human errors and design flaws. So the Titanic didn't sink from a single iceberg alone. It sank from a deadly combination of overconfidence, engineering limits, and unfortunate circumstances. The iceberg was the catalyst, not the sole culprit.
You've probably seen images of ancient Egyptians revering cats and maybe assumed they were worshipping them as gods. It's a cute and compelling idea, but it's a myth. Cats were highly respected in Egypt because they were practical and symbolic. They protected homes and granaries from pests, and their graceful, mysterious nature made them symbols of protection and fertility. People did not worship cats as gods themselves. Instead, they associated cats with deities like Bastet, the goddess of home, fertility, and protection. Killing a cat, even accidentally, was a serious crime, but that reverence was about symbolism and utility, not literal divinity. So ancient Egyptians didn't worship cats as gods. They revered the qualities cats represented. Their admiration was rooted in respect and practicality, not feline deification.
When you hear the name Einstein, your mind might jump to E = mc squared, and maybe even the atomic bomb. But here's the truth. Einstein did not invent the bomb. Albert Einstein's famous equation explained the relationship between mass and energy, which laid the theoretical groundwork for nuclear energy. But he was a pacifist and had no direct role in creating weapons. The atomic bomb was developed decades later by the Manhattan Project, led by scientists like Robert Oppenheimer and Enrico Fermi. Einstein did sign a letter to President Roosevelt warning that Nazi Germany might develop nuclear weapons, but that's about as close as he got. So Einstein's genius inspired ideas, but he did not build, design, or detonate the bomb. The myth turns his brilliance into something he never intended, and the reality is far more nuanced and historically accurate.
The Bermuda Triangle, a patch of ocean infamous for swallowing ships and planes under mysterious circumstances. It sounds spooky, thrilling, and completely out of control, but here's the reality. The mystery is mostly a myth. Research shows that the area doesn't have a significantly higher rate of disappearances than other heavily traveled regions. Many incidents can be explained by storms, human error, compass anomalies, and strong currents. The legend grew thanks to sensationalized books and media stories that turned ordinary accidents into paranormal drama. So the Bermuda Triangle isn't some supernatural death trap, it's just a busy part of the Atlantic Ocean with unpredictable weather, strong currents, and a lot of storytelling. The real danger is believing myths over facts.
When you think of the witch hunts of Europe and colonial America, you probably imagine villagers accusing women of casting spells and curses. But here's the truth. Witch hunts weren't mostly about magic. They were about power, fear, and social control. Accusations often targeted vulnerable women, the poor, or those who threatened social norms. Communities blamed witches for crop failures, illnesses, or misfortune, but the real driver was anxiety, scapegoating, and politics, not supernatural practice. Many accused witches may never have practiced magic at all. The trials were a way for authorities to assert control and for communities to channel fear.
So while magic was the excuse, the real story of witch hunts is far darker. It's about human behavior, prejudice, and the manipulation of fear. The evil spell narrative masks the true horror of social injustice.
You've probably heard it 1,000 times. People in the Middle Ages never bathed, and they all smelled terrible. It's a vivid, dramatic image, but it's mostly false. While hygiene practices were different from modern standards, many medieval Europeans bathing was common, especially in public bathhouses, rivers, and private tubs. People washed regularly for health, religious, and social reasons. Soap made from animal fat and lye existed, and cleanliness was actually associated with status and morality. The filthy medieval peasant stereotype comes from later propaganda, exaggeration, and the decline of public bathhouses during certain periods. So medieval people weren't universally dirty, they just had different customs and facilities. The myth simplifies a complex picture of daily life and human hygiene over centuries. You've probably seen images of the Great Sphinx of Giza and heard the dramatic story. Napoleon's troops, during their Egyptian campaign, fired cannons and destroyed the Sphinx's nose. It's a vivid, almost cinematic image. But it's completely false. Historical evidence shows the Sphinx's nose was missing centuries before Napoleon arrived in Egypt. Early sketches and writings from travelers in the 15th and 16th centuries already depicted it broken. The real cause is debated. Some say it was deliberate vandalism by iconoclasts. Others believe erosion played a role. But it definitely wasn't Napoleon. So Napoleon's army didn't vandalize the Sphinx. The myth persists because it's dramatic, ties a famous historical figure to a famous monument, and makes history feel more explosive than it really was.
You've probably seen the viral experiment. A tooth placed in a glass of cola left overnight, and magically it's dissolved. Sounds terrifying, right? But here's the truth. Cola doesn't instantly eat away at your teeth. Soft drinks do contain acids and sugar that can contribute to enamel erosion over time, but it's a gradual process, not an overnight disaster. The viral experiment exaggerates the effect for shock value and sometimes uses other tricks, like leaving the tooth for days or weeks, to get dramatic results. Drinking cola in moderation and practicing basic dental hygiene won't cause your teeth to vanish in a single night. So the idea of cola as a magic tooth erasing potion is a myth. But over time, sugary and acidic drinks can harm enamel if consumed irresponsibly. Reality is slower, less shocking, but still important for dental care.
You've probably heard it countless times. Humans are born with all the brain cells they'll ever have, and once they die, they're gone forever. It sounds permanent and terrifying, but it's not true. Research over the last few decades has shown that certain brain cells, especially in the hippocampus, can regenerate throughout life. This process, called neurogenesis, helps with learning, memory, and even recovery from some brain injuries. While not all neurons can regenerate, the brain is far more adaptable and resilient than the old myth suggests. So the idea that brain cells are finite is outdated. Your brain is constantly creating, adapting, and rewiring itself, proof that our mental potential is far more dynamic than we've been led to believe.
You've probably been told that diamonds are precious because they're rare, shimmering treasures from deep inside the earth. It's a compelling story, but it's misleading. In reality, diamonds are more common than most people think. The reason they're so expensive isn't scarcity. It's careful marketing and supply control. Companies like De Beers spent decades limiting the number of diamonds sold, creating the illusion of rarity and driving up prices. Nature produces plenty of diamonds. It's human economics not geology, that makes them precious. So, diamonds aren't rare. They're just made to feel rare. The sparkle comes not from scarcity, but from centuries of clever marketing that convince the world they're priceless.
Monosodium glutamate, or MSG, has long been blamed for headaches, flushing, and the infamous Chinese restaurant syndrome. It sounds like a medical fact, but it's mostly a myth. Extensive scientific studies have found no consistent evidence that MSG causes these symptoms in the vast majority of people. The myth started in the 1960s with a single letter to a medical journal, and it snowballed into widespread fear, often fueled by cultural bias against Chinese cuisine. While some extremely sensitive individuals might react to large amounts, for most people, MSG is completely safe and naturally present in foods like tomatoes, cheese, and soy sauce. So the next time someone warns you about MSG, remember, the syndrome is more about myth, fear, and cultural misunderstanding than actual science.
You've probably seen the iconic image, a green, stitched-up monster lumbering forward, and someone shouts, "It's Frankenstein!" But here's the truth. Frankenstein is not the monster. In Mary Shelley's 1818 novel, Victor Frankenstein is the scientist, the creator of the creature. The monster doesn't even have a name. He's often called Frankenstein's creature or the creature. Over time, movies, plays, and pop culture fused the name of the scientist with his creation, creating the misconception we know today. So the terrifying figure with bolts in his neck isn't Frankenstein. It's the product of his obsession and hubris. Understanding the difference makes the story darker and more fascinating. The real horror isn't just the creature, but the consequences of human ambition.
You've probably heard the story. A cow kicked over a lantern, starting the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. It's vivid, almost cartoonish, but it's almost certainly false. The legend was popularized by a newspaper looking for a simple, dramatic explanation. In reality, the exact cause of the fire remains unknown. Chicago had dry conditions, wooden buildings, and strong winds that made the city a tinderbox. Assigning blame to Mrs. O'Leary's cow gave people someone or something to blame, but it oversimplifies a complex disaster. So no, the cow probably wasn't responsible. The Great Chicago Fire was a combination of bad luck, human settlement patterns, and environmental conditions. Sometimes the truth is more mundane, but far more historically accurate than the stories we love to tell.